Raise your hand if you have ever used the phrase, you know what I mean, because you couldn't clearly explain something that made sense to you, to someone else. Yeah, well, I have to. And bridging that gap between idea and impact is why we are here today. My name is Aliyah, and I'm from Morocco. As an international student, moving to Berkeley was intimidating and quickly became overwhelming. There's so many creative clubs, challenging classes, and exciting opportunities to be a part of. But I learned that the most important thing you can do is focus on what idea, what project that you want to grow next. And few people understand that better than someone who has built platforms around making expertise resonate, helping innovation grow beyond the innovator. Today's speaker is Lisa Choi Owens. Lisa is head of membership at Gerson Lehrman Group, the world's largest expert network, connecting over 1 million specialists from engineers and asset managers to lawyers and former government leaders. Before that, she served as senior advisor at TED Conferences and previously as chief revenue officer and director. She even launched TED Tech, expanding one of the world's most influential platforms into a dedicated space for technology-driven visions. Lisa understands not only which ideas are worth spreading, but how to spread them by putting the audience before content. And this is only part of the story. She didn't begin in media or tech. She began in finance, mastering the fundamentals before moving into the digital space. And while she graduated with an MBA at Harvard, she first earned her bachelor's degree right here at UC Berkeley, proof that this campus doesn't just produce thinkers, but leaders, innovators, and communicators. As soon-to-be graduates, we can learn from Lisa how to ensure our ideas don't stay small. In a world flooded with content, that ability is what makes our voices matter. So without further ado, please join me in warmly welcoming Lisa Choi Owens.
Okay, so it's been now 32 years since I graduated from Berkeley, which is kind of stunning. And it's exciting every time I come back. I told the CEO that I work for right now, I said, listen, if there's a time that I need to carve out every year when I start here, because I started at GLG last year, I said, this is the 1 week that I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to come to and take some days off, because coming back to my alma mater is thrilling, but to come back and teach is really pretty one of the most exciting things that I have in my life, aside from my children and lots of other things as well. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be here, so thank you so much. I'm definitely going to come with a very different point of view. I'm certainly not an engineer. I'm not technical by nature, even though I've actually run technical teams. So I have, I've had a few years of work experience under my belt. And so I wanted to just talk to you about what I want to share. I want to go through the agenda really quick so that you can understand what it is that we're going to be covering today. And I first want to start off with my career, just so that we can get a sense of and kind of grounding, like, why do I have a right to be up here? What kind of background do I have? And how, on many levels, can you might be able to relate to many different portions of my career, because it's been very storied. And then I want to talk to you about some TED Talks that have shaped the way that I think and look at life and the way that I look at work. People ask me often for like my favorite TED Talks. I've got hundreds of them, but I wanted to curate a few that I think are really apropos for the time that we're in right now, particularly as it pertains to AI. And then I wanted to talk to you about how you might want to think about managing your career in the age of AI. I know it's stressful. There are moments where I think, oh, thank God I'm on the backside of my career. And then I go, shoot, I have 2 kids in college. So I guess I have to worry about this for them as well. So it's been really actually a wonderful self-fulfilling kind of virtuous cycle for me to actually go to work, learn about what's going on in AI, and then kind of feed that back into this conversation that I'm going to have with you guys today. And then lastly, I'm going to try as I might, to make sure that you try to stay sane during this process, because I know that this is an incredibly stressful, weird time. Nobody is prescient. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but we know whatever's happening is happening quick. So let me go ahead and get started with my career. So I very purposely had this slide made by actually another Cal grad. I think Matt's speaking.
Matt spoke at our resilience class, but he's spoken here.
Okay, yes, he's spoken right. So this is another friend of mine from Cal. He did this beautiful illustration for me. But there are two different versions. I could have shown you the LinkedIn version, which would have made it look neat and tidy, as though I have absolutely been intentional with every single step along the way. But I very purposely wanted you to look at this, to understand that it could almost look like you're watching a police detective show and they're trying to find the murderer, and then they've got yarn and Post-its and tape and pictures all over the place, because it can be that random. There is no such thing as perfect, and I think if anyone tells you that they know exactly what they did at every movement from job to job to job, and that they were absolutely aware of what they were doing, they're likely lying to you, unless they're doctors. I do think that that's probably one field where you probably have a better idea of what direction that you're going in. But we've already kind of gone through the logos and the different companies that I've worked for. It's to first show you there's an incredible variety and there's a really long circuitous path. And you can look at this and be, oh my God, it's chaotic. Or you can look at this and say, this is actually kind of interesting and fun. But rather than go into every job, what I'd rather do is actually go through the transitions. Because it turns out that those were the moments where I learned more often than I did in the job itself. So I first want to start out what it was like for me when I left Cal. So just to give you a little bit of backdrop, my parents were Korean immigrants. So they came here with no English, no money, no college. And so my sister and I were both really fortunate to come to UC Berkeley when tuition was $800 a semester. Yes, I know. And when we ended, I think by my senior year, it was $1,600 a semester. So I'm guessing it's a little bit different today. But at the time, it was just a true gift to be in state and to kind of just be from the background that I am. But I think as a result of that, hardworking, amazing opportunities that they gave to us, I knew I didn't have a financial net. So when I came out of college, or I was kind of preparing during my senior year, I was like, I want to be a newscaster. So I started looking into programs in journalism schools, and then I realized you make like $12 a year. And I thought, you know what? This isn't going to work for me. And so this is one of the first things that I want everyone to think about. So you'll often be told, do what you love. I actually think that's a luxury. So there are moments, and there are definitely going to be people in here that have those resources, and thank God for that. That's all we work for, right? We're trying to do well now so that we can create this kind of financial stability for our children in the future. I didn't have that luxury as much as I had a wonderful life. And so the choice that I made was one that was pretty basic. I need to make the most money possible because it's my responsibility. My own financial success and just the safety and security of my life is dependent upon the money that I make because I have nowhere to draw from after that. And so, but that, what I should have done, and I would really make sure that you guys do think about, is not just your means, because it does matter. You do have to start thinking about the trajectory of your career. One of the things I wish someone had told me, if you want to make money, make sure that the company that you work for makes money, right? Look at their margins, look at their profits, look at how many employees they are and how much of that wealth gets distributed around how large an employee base. Are they laden with debt? There are a lot of these kinds of questions I wish I'd known. So understanding your means when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do with your career is really important. But the other thing that I barely did in a super ignorant way was to actually look at what I think my skills are, which is very different than what you love. It's what are you really good at? And this is how basic and simple. This is a little bit embarrassing, and I'm sure you guys are all much smarter than I was. But I thought, you know what? Sales and trading sounds interesting. It's a lively floor, and I have kind of a bubbly personality. I'm sure I'd be good at sales. Very different, I'm sure. Have any of you guys watched Industry, the show? No? Well, if you watch it, you'll see this is basically my life. Doing sales in fixed income and foreign exchange is not the same as doing sales anywhere else. And so I went into this job basically blind. I didn't understand anything about math. I didn't know finance. So you're probably wondering why on earth would I choose this job? And about 3 to 4 months into it, I was like, why on earth did I choose this job? But what it did give me was a name brand and training that was unmatched. I had 3 months of training so that I understood the basics of just the financial markets and how financial institutions work. Lo and behold, 32 years later, it turned out to be incredibly important for me to understand some of those mechanics. But I did quickly find out around 16 to 18 months, this is not for me. And so I left, and I ended up going to Tommy Hilfiger, which sounds really strange, But you guys hang out with people that are similar to yourselves. I was friends with everyone who was working in investment banking and in management consulting, all in New York City. And it turned out Lehman Brothers, who I don't know if you guys even know what they are because they're no longer around, had taken Tommy Hilfiger public, and a whole group of people from Lehman Brothers went from there to Tommy Hilfiger. And so I ended up moving from a bank to a fashion company, but there was a common thread, and that common thread was actually just being analytical. So I wasn't in the sexy part of a fashion company, I was in the boring analytical part, but it gave me a way in. I was able to wedge myself into a brand new experience by actually using my functional expertise. And so then, as one would, 1 year of Tommy Hilfiger and 1 year of JP Morgan in fixed income and foreign exchange, I'm ready to apply to Harvard Business School, and I think I have a shot. No, I honestly, there's some days I can't even believe I had the hubris to apply when I did, but I did, and for a variety of reasons now that I have the confidence in knowing I did deserve to get in. I didn't feel like I deserved to get in when I went, but I went, and it was an amazing opportunity. And again, it was with my peer set because so many of them were applying to business school that sometimes it's just you go with the flow. Like, what are other people doing? What are my peers? What are my friends doing? And so it was, needless to say, it was an incredible opportunity. When I came out, I thought I would do investment banking and, there was consumer packaged goods, there was management consulting. These are all things that seem very, very different, and I think a lot easier from when I was graduating from college. There were more kind of like understood lanes from what is next in your career. You're a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, a management consultant, et cetera. You're in advertising. So those were the paths that I wanted to take, but when I graduated, ta-da, it's the internet bubble. Now, I just called it the internet. Little did I know it was a bubble until, let's see here, I graduated in June, went through an IPO process in December. The bubble burst, so it was my first big financial shock in March of 2000.
Lisa, can you tell us what year that was?
That was 2000. That's 2000. So we went public in December of 99, and then March 2000 was the internet bubble, and it burst, and the economy tanked. And then by June, 1 year later, we were delisted from the NASDAQ. So that was my IPO experience. That was my startup experience. And so, here we go again. I have to look for another job. So I ended up moving around from place to place. I ended up getting married. I moved down to DC, and I had to get a job down there, et cetera, et cetera. But what you'll see here is that for the most part, I was just always willing to try something new. I was always trying to either try something new or to seize the moment. So as an example, I ended up at AMC Networks, which is part of Cablevision, Madison Square Garden. I worked at a little baby MTV called Fuse. And when I was there, I ended up meeting with somebody through a leadership program that I had met. She introduced me to her boss, and eventually I moved over to Scripps Networks. And when I was at Scripps, I had this boss, and I loved her. And I remember walking out of the office going, I love her so much, I could work for her forever. I'm so happy. And a week later, she quit. These are the kinds of things that are completely unanticipated. So I cried, had a few cocktails with some of my colleagues. I moved on with my life, and I ended up presenting at a sales meeting. And during that sales meeting, the AV went out. There were probably 300-400 people in the audience. And so I kind of had to tap dance my way through the just incredible awkwardness of everything breaking down, and the lights aren't working, and the sound's not working. But it turned out that the president of the network was sitting in the back of the room. And I impressed him enough, I guess, from the work and exposure I'd had up until that point. But that was the moment where he then offered me my boss's job. So I went from having 4 employees and running business development to having 220 employees and running a $100 million digital business where I had over 100 engineers working for me, mostly based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. So these are things that happen in your life, but I did seize that moment, and that's another moment. So when I came out of business school, it was the internet. Did I really care? I was like, yeah, .com, I think it's gonna be big. There were moments where I thought, it's kind of interesting, but am I technical? Do I really understand web publishing? I didn't care because this was the thing to do. And this was a moment where I thought, where am I ever gonna have this opportunity to be in my mid-30s and have this large of a role? Was I ready? No, but it was an incredible opportunity, and that really kind of changed the trajectory of my career. And so you see in a lot of these different moments in time, I just said, is this a moment that I want to pay attention to, I want to jump in with both feet? Or is this just, it's time to try something new. I don't have a choice. I went to DC, I ended up in wireless software. Why? There just weren't that many other roles that were down there. It was government contracting, there were political organizations, working for the government. That was not an option for me. And so I just want everyone to really just understand that there is such a thing as a career that looks like this. It may seem sloppy, and in the end, and if I story tell it correctly, I can paint this to look like the most brilliant story of someone who absolutely knew what she was doing and why she's gone on this incredibly successful career path and been in the C-suite 3 times, but it's simply not true. And so I think for most people, I just want you guys to understand that the first job is a really important step. It's not the end of your life. It's not the beginning of the only part of your life. Every one of these things can actually lead to something else. You don't necessarily need to stay in a job for 20 years. You're going to move around. And what I think that adds to your life is also it just makes it a little bit interesting. You meet new people, you get to new experiences, and you end up learning more. And all of that is additive. And you can bring something from each of those experiences into your next role. So I did want to talk about some of these things. So I talked about trying new things, seizing the moment, and then betting on myself. And these are the moments where you just kind of have to have a little bit of blind confidence. So when I applied to HBS, 1 year at Tommy Hilfiger, 1 year in fixed income and foreign exchange sales and trading, and somehow I thought, you know what, I can do this. The second time that I actually bet on myself, I was at Scripps. I had already been in the role for about 4 or 5 years. I was running this organization, and I had done a deal with a company that I thought, this is a clever business, and I feel like we should do something similar to this. So then the head of ad sales and I wrote a business plan. By the way, when everyone says, oh, just write a business plan, I went to business school. I didn't know what a business plan looked like. Honestly, I still don't. So don't let that also intimidate you because not everyone understands what that looks like. But we did. We built something called a business plan. We went to the board as entrepreneurs. We were funded internally. We went out and bought a video platform, launched an entirely new business inside the company. Was I 100% ready? Probably not. But again, there's a lot of 80-20 that you want to apply to some of these decisions. I knew enough. I had a partner. This was exactly the right dynamic, and so I did it. So that's just another example of betting on myself. But I'm going to tell you right now that networking, which is an annoying buzzword, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, someone's going to tell me to network again, or oh, this is unnatural for me. I don't like doing it. Let me just tell you why this is so important. My first job out of college was a campus recruiting effort. Every other job came from networking. Not one other opportunity came from me applying online or some other formal process, even coming out of business school. None of those. Every single one of them, I knew somebody who knew somebody. I ingratiated myself with people. I expanded my network. I did uncomfortable things and talked to groups of strangers. And I think the 8 different companies that I went to, every single one of those jobs came from networking. And if you think that networking is reserved for only kind of senior level folks, let's not forget, the first time I did that, I was only 1 year out of college. So I was 1 year out. It was around 16 months into JP Morgan where I'm like, this is not really going to be the career for me. And that was a form of informal networking. So in as much as you can, please make sure that you get out of your echo chamber. Don't only talk to people that look and sound like you, who are studying exactly what you do, that are in your social strata, that are in your cultural kind of norm. Try to make sure that you expose yourself to lots of different populations because you have no idea how many new opportunities can come your way if you do that. I can't emphasize it enough. So TED Talks. So this was, Jane Fonda has a documentary. It's a brilliant documentary. She talks about her life in 5 acts. I think this was my act 2, was TED Talks. So when I left Scripps, I had been there for about 6.5 years, and it was intensely stressful. So I reported to the president. I was the youngest person on the executive committee. This is when streaming video was a new thing. I ended up going to the CES. And I went, and there was the first internet-connected TV, and I came back to the company, and I was like, oh, my hair on fire. Our business it's over. Cable television as we know it is over. Nobody fell for it. I was like, you guys are wrong. Well, let's fast forward to today. But anyway, it was really, really stressful, big moves that we had to make, big bets. A lot was riding on my shoulders. So by the time I left, I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I had 2 young kids, I had a husband that was traveling all the time. So I decided to just completely pack up and do something entirely different. So what did I do? I went into the Amazon jungle. I went with a group of people that I had met through another leadership organization, and I went down into the depths of Ecuador with a nonprofit organization called the Pachamama Alliance, which is dedicated to preserving the sacred headwaters of the Amazon. And I met a bunch of total strangers. And I didn't even go with the idea that I was going to look for a job. I just went because I needed a mental break and I needed to completely reset my brain and go, okay, what is my next act? And it was there that I'm just having really casual conversations with people. They're asking me to describe what it is that I do. And because none of them came from my background, I was just using really basic, simple language as to what it was I did. And I said, I just do a lot of online video. And someone said, well, why don't you work at TED? And I remember thinking, you know what? I have been looking down an alley that I thought was this wide. I'd looked at 40, 50 different companies. I was looking at The Economist and the New York Times and CNBC and Comcast and all of these equivalents to my old job. And then someone says, you should look at TED. TED was completely outside of my line of sight. And this is the reason why I like to show this as an image. It opened the aperture of what I understood was my worldview. I honest to God thought at that point I had a big life. I traveled all over the world. I'd gotten my master's degree. I had lots of jobs. I worked on Wall Street, and I thought, oh, my world is this wide. And when someone told me about TED, I realized, oh, I was actually really living my life in a very narrow lane. So this is one of the greatest gifts that I had in this Act 2, was not only doing something that had impact, but also because it was education where I didn't have a paper due, I didn't have any tests that I had to do. I just got to learn for the sake of learning, and it was one of the greatest experiences in my life. So what I wanted to do is share just a curated list of some of my favorites. So I'm going to start with something that's a little bit more on the nose, but most of these talks are really meant to show you that there are lots of different weird connections that most people won't necessarily see or that are not obvious, but are just give so many clever options for solutions and ways of solving really intractable problems that I just wanted to share them with you. And none of them really are super directly related to AI, except for this one. So does anyone know who Garry Kasparov is? Yeah, so he was a Russian chess grandmaster, and I think he was world champion for something like 10 or 15 years. And there was a period of time where actually computers started to play against him, so it was kind of man versus machine. So there's probably 5 years or so that he was actually winning against the machine. And then I want to say it was 1987, IBM came out with their supercomputer Deep Blue, and he lost. And what happened was the headlines were dire. Some of them were like, it's the brain's last stand. Like, it was just like, wah, wah. I mean, this guy, it's over for him, right? And so he could have, just left the stage and said, this is it for me. There's no possible way that I'm going to win again. But instead, what happened was, as technology evolved, there were different permutations of competition. So now they had versions where it was computer only, grand chess master only, and then people who were basically just managing the process with the machine. This was, I would say, the first Centaur era, like Centaur age. I think we're in our second Centaur age right now. But that was the hybrid of man versus machine. And so not surprisingly, man versus machine at that period of time ended up winning. But what we learned back then, in a completely different context, and it wasn't completely AI as we know it now, it turned out that the process of figuring out how to coach and prompt that machine was the winning combination, and that's why it beat out human only, machine only. There was a golden age, I want to say 10 years, 15 years following that. We are no longer in that stage anymore, and probably not surprisingly, computers are basically winning at every chess match. It didn't kill chess, by the way, though. People still really love playing chess. So anyway, it's just kind of an example of what a way in which you can take a loss, turn it into something different, and learn that there are actually other permutations that are worth looking at, and it's never quite as dire as it seems. So this next one comes from another TED speaker. I have 2 talks from him. I love him so much. His name is Stephen Johnson. He's an author and a TV host and a podcaster, et cetera, et cetera. But this was about a talk that he gave in 2010, so a really long time ago. And it was an example of someone who'd seen a problem. It was in rural Africa, and there was a problem with infant mortality. And because there were so many premature babies, they were cold, and they had a very difficult time making sure that these babies were warm. So there were some nonprofits that came into these rural villages, and they brought these neonatal incubators. And they were $40,000 a piece, which you can imagine back then was incredibly expensive. And so they worked, and so they started to see progress, and infant mortality rates were going down rather. And then the machines did what most machines do. They broke. So what happened when they broke? Dead babies. That's the first. Yes, that is probably likely what happened. But what happened actually, aside from that, is that they stopped fixing them. They didn't know how. There was nobody in these rural villages that understood how to fix these neonatal incubators, and they didn't have the parts. So here's another example where you can walk away and say, it's over, you know what, game over. We tried our best. This is not a model that works in these rural sub-Saharan African villages. But instead what they did was they said, okay, let's think about another circumstance where there's a use of electronics that does seem to be working in this environment and in this culture. And they looked around, and actually if you travel abroad and you go to most third world countries, what you will find is a prevalence of Toyotas. So Toyotas are cars that are really, they're everywhere in the world. And there's also an incredible economy that supports it with parts and people who understand how to fix Toyotas. And these cars have a lifespan of 40 to 50 years. So what they did, instead of aborting and leaving, they ended up rebuilding the neonatal incubators entirely of Toyota car parts. So I look at this and I go, what kind of mind do you want to invest in that can see these really kind of distinctly unrelated things and see that there might actually be a solution to be found? That's one of the reasons why it's so open to make sure, it's so important to make sure that the aperture is open in the way that you look at the world, because there are solutions kind of right in front of you that don't seem obvious. So here's another example. This came from actually an article that Stephen Johnson wrote. And so this came from Apple when Steve Jobs decided he wanted to create a retail store. And this is the time when absolutely everything was going online, and people were like, that's a stupid idea. Why would you do this? But he decided to barrel forward, as he does. And rather than doing research at, Best Buy or Circuit City, which I'm sure you guys have never heard of, or Sam Goody, which I'm sure you guys have never heard of. These are all retailers, obviously, that died. But that would be the first place you would go. Like, let me go to another electronics retailer and figure out what they're doing and see if we can do it better. But instead, they said, we want to completely turn retail on its head for electronics, and we believe service is the most important thing. So what did they do? They go, who is best at service? It turns out it's the Ritz-Carlton. So they went and they observed concierges at the Ritz-Carlton to see what good service looks like. And then soon-to-be managers of Apple stores all went through a training program that was similar to the Ritz-Carlton concierge training program. Another example of looking in a place that is unexpected for a solution that, needless to say, was wildly successful. And this is the last one. I think I told you that people are constantly asking me what my favorite TED Talk is. This is my favorite TED Talk. This is Robin Steinberg. She gave a talk in 2018 that says, what if we end the injustice of bail? And so what we say at TED is the sign of a good talk is you know that I care. I'm the speaker. I'm sharing the idea. You know that I care. The sign of a great talk is when you make me care. I make you care about what it is that I'm saying. This is one of those circumstances. I knew this much about bail. I also had no idea about the injustice of bail. So let me share a few statistics with you on how bail works. So there are 500,000 people that are incarcerated every single day that have been convicted of nothing. 99% of all growth in the jail system over the last 20 years is pretrial incarceration. So what happens? Someone gets picked up off the street. They are not yet charged. They're put in jail. And the only way that they can be released is through bail. So as you can imagine, there are some populations that can afford it, and there are lots of populations that can't. So these are people who now have to pick up their children from school. They have to go to their job or they'll lose it. They have to go to an immigration trial. They have to go take care of their aging parents. There are a million responsibilities that these people have. They're desperate, they're dire, they can barely put food on the table. So what do they get offered by the prosecutor? Plead guilty. Just plead guilty. You can go home and have dinner with your family. I don't need to tell you guys what it means to have a conviction on your record that follows you around for the rest of your life. This is a form of injustice that I did not really understand existed. So Robin Steinberg, who is a lifelong public defender, her husband is also a public defender. They're just sitting at their coffee table lamenting like, this seems so unfair. I wish we had a better solution. I wish there was like some kind of a financial fund or something that we could do that would somehow pay for all of these bails. Because what they do know is that when you go back to trial, and if the case gets dismissed, the bail money comes back. So that was the premise that they were like, what if we created a fund, kind of like the funds that we see in finance, where we fund it and then we put it out and then we get a return on that money and then we feed that back into the fund. This was kind of the general thesis. People laughed at them and said, no way. This is why people skip bail. They're never going to show up to their court hearing. Well, it turned out over 10 years, 96% of people came back. 96% of people came back for their court hearing. 50% of the cases got dropped. 2% of those people ended up actually getting jail time. It turned out that that program showed a 2 to 3 times force multiplier on the use of that $1. So it came back 2 to 3 times to be able to service other people's bail. And it was so successful that TED, this is how I learned about them, came through the Audacious program and was funded $30 million to replicate this in other markets. So this is yet another example. Someone saying, I'm looking at bail, but maybe I should look at the financial markets and how funds work. Another novel solution, and this one is really, truly, it's a tearjerker. It's absolutely worth talking about because A, it's an important issue, and also she's the most brilliant public speaker. So anyway, those are the TED Talks that I think are relevant to what we're going to talk about next, which is about how to think about your career as things move and change and how you need to be agile. So you and your AI career, what are you going to do? The one thing that we do know is that there are certain things that are really distinctly human. And so while I can't tell you, well, I probably can tell you, maybe not software, but there are certain areas that have slightly less risk. But if there's anything that you can do right now, it's to invest in human skills. But I'm going to go beyond just the networking or building trust or things that seem really generic. I'm talking about things that I use every day and that have absolutely contributed to my success. So this is using soft power. This is coalition building before a meeting. This has to do with reading sentiment in the room, understanding a facial expression and gleaning something from that. This has to do with understanding why you may or may not suggest a particular solution inside of a company because there are 2 political factions that exist inside the same organization. These are all things that I promise you AI does not know how to do. And that relationship building and the ability to communicate clearly and effectively, to be able to use soft power in the right moments, are things that you want to have experiences with, because this is where you can beat AI. So there's one thing that I really want to make sure is very clear. AI, it's absolutely dominant. It's part of every single conversation. Everyone talks about it. Everyone's using it, myself included. But I will say, please beware of the creep. So I'm going to give you 2 examples that have nothing to do with AI, that have to do with what it means and why it's so important for you to actually do what it is that you are learning or leading with. So here's a really simple example, handwriting. So it turns out that it's studied, and there are some studies that came out of Princeton and UCLA that talked about what handwriting does. And handwriting actually does trigger a different form of comprehension and long-term retention. And so that's why there's a big difference between this rote behavior of typing and how it's really harder for you to retain that knowledge versus when you write it. So there's actually this kind of mind-body connection that's really wildly important. think about what will happen to your brain if you copy and paste from AI. Think about the atrophy. We've already now know for a fact that there is a decline from handwriting to typing. What do you think happens when you go from typing to copy and paste, which is what's happening right now? You can't let this happen. You may want to try to have a parallel universe where we see what it's like when you do it yourself versus when you have AI do it, but I would urge all of you, please be sure that you keep your mind sharp, that you're able to do those things from those 4 TED speakers, which is finding all of these really distinctly interesting connections that AI may not be able to see. This is why AI fails at taxes. It can't make weird connections. It's not precise. So there are things that it can't do, but I'll tell you what you need to know how to do is to have critical thinking, because that's something that's going to remain incredibly important as you lead, as you manage, as you become orchestrators inside of these new organizations in an AI world. Please be sure of that. And I just wanted to give you one more example that is as analog gets, that really hit home for me. So 1 million years ago when I got my driver's license, my mom was excited I could run errands for her. So way back when, who knew my mom was like OG Korean drama? But she loved Korean drama. So we went to the VHS store, no joke, to get her Korean drama tapes hundreds of times. So finally I get my license and she goes, Lisa, can you please go and get me my Korean drama? I was like, no problem. So I confidently go to the car, I start driving, and I immediately get lost. I was gobsmacked by this, but I do realize now it's because the entire time I was in the passenger seat. I was an observer. Was not behind the wheel. I didn't actually do the work. If you don't do the work, you can't really learn it. If you don't understand by doing, you can't actually communicate clearly and with authority that you know what it is that you're talking about. So it's just really, really important. Be careful because, listen, it is easy to lean on it. It's easy to lean on it, but don't forget it's also imperfect and it does hallucinate, but make sure that you keep your mind sharp. So I wanted to move on to how you can stay sane. So there are lots of horror stories. So I read something recently that said by the end of next year, 37% of companies plan on displacing some percentage of their jobs with AI. And then a day later, I read an article that talked about the fact that while AI might displace 92 million jobs, there might be 170 million new opportunities that come from AI. So which story is true? Which one do you want to believe? I wanted to show you this chart. I won't make you guess what it stands for, but you can see that there's, this slow and steady growth curve, and then there's the wild and erratic red line. What this actually stands for is a talk that the Anthropic CEO gave at the World Economic Forum, and he talked about how there's just a lot of hype and we have to be very careful. So the blue line actually has to do with what he says is truly predictable growth and expansion of AI capabilities. It was something that they kind of anticipated, and as you can see, it's just a marginal growth curve. It's not a hockey stick, and it's not vertical in the way that some of us lose sleep over. What the red line is actually media attention. AI launches, Gemini launches, there's regulatory issues that start happening with the Trump administration, et cetera, et cetera. So it ranges wildly from euphoria to panic. And I think that might be the place where some people are now. Certainly coming out of college, there's all kinds of this type of bad news. And I'm not here to comfort you. I'm not here to tell you that I know for a fact what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is that, like all curves, there are different slopes, but they eventually smooth out. There's a reason that there are things like medians and means. These things do smooth out over time, and they may have a different slope. But even with AI, I was surprised when I saw this chart come out. So don't let your emotions be run by the red line, because the media, it's important for them to sell eyeballs because there are big stories to be told, but the truth really lies somewhere in between. So just make sure that you maintain just a baseline of information. Make sure that you have multiple news sources so that you try to keep some sanity and keep your eye on the blue line. And then I remember there was a speaker that we had recently at GLG, and we were talking about AI and media. But he started out by saying, "You're in charge." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Humans are in charge." So when you open up an AI screen, what's the very first thing that happens in that box? A human has to prompt AI. A human being has to write something in there and make a request or an inquiry or a question or ask it to do some type of analysis. But the human being is the very first person that has to do the prompt to get the work going. And obviously AI has tremendous capabilities that human beings can't do. But we have to make sure that we stay in charge, that we know enough to remain in charge. So the advice that I would give you is the more you know, the more capable you are of staying in charge. This is the moment. If you've heard of Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point where they say 10,000 hours is where you get mastery, we are at the very beginning of 10,000 hours. On some level, you might want to look at this as an era. You're lucky. This is the beginning. No one really knows anything. No one has really truly accrued 10,000 hours of knowledge and experience. So be a sponge. Learn how to have AI be your co-pilot. Be the one that understands how to coach and to train and to prompt that AI. And this is where you're going to get your competitive edge when you're interviewing with other people. I'll tell you right now, we hire tons of people. We fire tons of people. But when we hire, we actually look for how well are you using AI. We're not sitting here wondering, oh no, did you have AI write your resume? If it did, which tool did you use? How good were you at wielding AI in your favor? But the only way that you can do that is by being sharp and learning and getting into as many courses as you can and experimenting with as many of these AI tools as you can in both your personal and professional life. Don't let it do everything for you, but learn how to have it be your co-pilot. It's really, really important that you do that. So, and I think the last thing that I want to say is a little bit like the networking one. It's probably a little bit annoying to hear. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about your attitude. If you show up at work and you push buttons or you copy and paste, do you think you're going to stand out? Do you think you're going to be able to preserve your job? Or that you're going to beat out the guy that's right next to you? It turns out that showing up, having done the work, actually having invested a little bit of extra time in learning about AI on the side, coming a little early, staying a little late, raising your hand, trying a little bit harder, these are the ways, these are the human things that will engender preference and respect from your coworkers and from your bosses and from the leadership team, is showing up with the right attitude and being curious. Because now it's not just about IQ and EQ, it's about what I call AQ, and this is about an adaptability quotient. So you have to make sure that you remain adaptable and be curious and look at different avenues for solutions, use AI as your sidecar, but just come in with the best attitude that you can, and it's a pretty good place to start. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. I hope we can have some time for questions.
I don't think, our theme is next level innovation. Mm-hmm. And we've heard about a lot of companies talking about next level innovation, but I think you are helping us talk about ourselves and how we get to the next level innovation in our own selves. Let's pull our chairs out. We're going to, we're going to leave time for you all to ask questions. And while I'm sitting up here with Lisa, and I'll fill in if there aren't questions, I'd rather have you all answer or ask. Is this okay? I guess, oh, yes. Those click into place. So I'll go ahead, and Claire and Bobby, we'll go ahead and take questions. We have a preference for questions from the back now. So raise your hand high and introduce yourself, but we'll start in the front here.
Hello.
Yep, you're all set. Hi.
My name's Isaac Laurelin. Amazing talk, thank you. I probably took the most notes out of anyone so far, and that's saying something because we have some great speakers here. Earlier, you were talking about how doing what you love is a privilege, and it's almost like an angle. So what would you recommend for loving what you do in the process to get there?
So I had a friend from college who loved art. She was an art history major. And she ended up working in galleries, and eventually I think she was at either Christie's or Sotheby's. And I remember observing her kind of like art falling from grace in her eyes because she had turned what she loved into a job. So that do what you love thing is just such a platitude that you have to be really careful about. There are things that you can love that you can do on the side. There are actually opportunities where you can do what you love in your work, but I think what is a more important thing to think about is what do you feel good doing? Are you good? Do you feel comfort in your body? Do you know that you somehow are a little bit better than other people at doing it? It may not, it may be accounting. It may be under reading tax code. You're exceptional at it. And there is actually a gift that comes from knowing that you're really good at something. It may not be what you love, but it's a different kind of joy that you can get. And there's actually more reward for being good at what you do than doing what you love. If you can find that combination, that's a magical combination. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that that cannot be the only holy grail. I think it's a little bit unrealistic. But it also doesn't mean that you have to abandon those things that you love. I think it is more important to be self-reflective about what things that you do really, really well, where you can stand out, because that's where you're going to get a new form of happiness and joy.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Zach. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you being here. So considering your variety of fields of expertise, at least with your whole career path, you have a broad level of intellect, and just like out of curiosity, both within business and tech, what's something that excites you about the future and what's something that worries you about the future, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. I didn't actually talk about where I work right now, and I wanted to share that with you because it's actually grounded in that. So I work for GLG, which is an expert network, and what we do is we provide expertise to the largest financial institutions, corporations, and professional services firms who are all looking to grow and invest in areas of the world and in every industry. And as you can imagine, most of those companies don't have every area of expertise in-house. So if somebody wants to invest in a Taiwanese sneaker market, it's highly unlikely that they have someone in-house. And so that's why they come to us, because we have built out this capability of being able to both match and deal with all of the orchestration and operationalization of making those people available in a compliant way to a lot of these financial institutions. That's a long way of saying we are paid to match people to a human being and their human expertise. And what I'm encouraged by is that while we still remain human, and we're still living in a human world, that last mile of conviction is still predicated on having spoken to a human being. I actually think that we're in a phase of life where AI is the great democratizer. It normalizes everything. Every one of the large language models are basically consuming the same publicly available data. PAR is here. Everyone can enter because the barrier to entry is so low, because now everyone has access to exact same data. So now what is important to sit on top of that? What is important is your ability to be a creative problem solver, your ability to communicate better. It's your ability to be, if you're a salesperson, a hunter and a closer. It's an ability to provide insight by being able to say, I'm connecting dots over the last 30 years of my experience that AI will not be able to draw from because it sits inside of my human brain. So to me, what excites me is that actually our human insight, I think, has even more value given this great democratizer of what AI has basically provided to the world. And there are many, many other wonderful things that happen with that. What scares me is we in the United States live in just the most raw form of capitalism, raw ambition, raw individualism. And I think we will lose sight of what's required to create scaffolding for all the massive change that's going to be happening through AI. And I was just thinking about this. You know how they have those tests for toddlers where it's like, there's one marshmallow. If you wait just 5 minutes, we'll give you 10 marshmallows. I feel, unfortunately, that we are in the marshmallow test right now. And we've been saying, should we wait? Should we collude with each other? Should we think about a regulatory framework? Should we consider what we're going to do with this concept of possible UBI or other types of safety nets if, in fact, there are moments in time where there is real decline in jobs because everyone is so individualistic and so ambitious and they're losing kind of the mid to long range viewpoint. And so my fear is that in particular in the construct that is America, that makes us great, that makes us grow at a pace that always outstrips everyone else, I think that that could be, that may not necessarily be the right place to prepare ourselves for what's to come.
Hi. My name is Isabel.
Hi.
I'm wondering, what's your best advice for standing out with a story and your storytelling in the age of AI?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So your best advice for standing out with like with the story and telling a story in the age of AI, when
Yeah.
it's so easy to kind of generate anything that's like really high quality.
Yeah. Live it. You have to have an experience. People can read it. You know, I went through this amazing program called the Institute for Embodied Wisdom, and it was the first time I'd learned about this notion of somatic leadership. And what the somatic, mind-body, you can't disconnect the two things. And the way that he started out this curriculum was, if you feel trust for somebody, can you put your finger on exactly why you trust them? You can't really. And you can have two people say the same exact thing, but for whatever reason, you might trust one over the other. It's that intangible that's very human. And if something is crafted for you, if someone wrote the script, if something is copied and pasted, human beings have the antenna to understand whether or not this is truly relatable or whether it's authentic. We still have that radar. It's really important. And the only way that you're going to be able to tell those stories is by actually experiencing things, to have things to tell stories about. So it's really important that you have a lot of varied baseline of experiences and that you continue to have those, because as you can tell, there are just more stories. And the way that I look at it, with every failure or every difficult experience I have, I tell my kids, turn it into a story. This is the way that you build relationships with people.
Where's the? And do you see how there are a couple? There's one hand way back there too. We've been because this group here is so great with questions.
Yeah.
We tend to get sucked into the middle.
We'll eventually get to the front, yeah.
Who's next?
Me. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for being here. Earlier in your talk, you mentioned that jobs come from networking, and I think it's like an awesome viewpoint that you have. Just a few weeks ago, we were actually speaking. I guess I'm not exactly sure who said it, but they mentioned that jobs no longer come from networking, and maybe an interview, if we're lucky, could come from networking. And you know, you obviously have a different experience than us, where tuition cost whatever it cost and everything else. And so I'm just wondering exactly if you have any tips on how to navigate this, right? Where I'm lucky if I can leverage some connection that I have to get some sort of entry-level interview,
Yeah.
rather than, a job. So
Yeah. Listen, I don't want to disparage whoever made that comment, that networking isn't going to matter. I think as long as we're breathing, living human beings that form relationships with people, give and get, someone does me a favor, I repay that favor, as long as that kind of economy continues to exist, networking is going to be important. And I think part of where that may have stemmed from is I know that there are all kinds of people that are really concerned with the use of AI during interview periods and hiring periods, because they say that they're just scanning, en masse all of the different applications and scouring LinkedIn and looking through resumes without really a human eye. And I think in that circumstance, it's even more important for you to network. It's even more important for you to have made a little bit of extra effort with somebody so that they can recall and remember who you were. You're not always going to have that window of opportunity, and it may not be with the person who's the exact hiring manager, but someone who knows someone who knows someone. Trust me when I tell you, I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I'm the daughter of a dry cleaner who did not go to college. And somehow I made it here. I applied to Harvard Business School. I didn't have a single letter of recommendation from anyone who'd been to that school. I pulled absolutely, nobody was there to help me. But eventually I went and I asked enough people, and I was tenacious about it, and it can be exhausting, but I actually think while we have AI reading without any care in the world for who the human being is underneath it, who you are as a human and how it is you show up with people that are somehow adjacent to companies that you're interested in, that's going to matter actually, I think, more than ever.
Interesting. Thank you.
I'm trying to think about that and who that could have been, but I think of Forrest Iandola, who basically came to Cal because of Kurt Koitzer.
I think it was Kurt that actually said that.
Oh, so it's interesting that Kurt, who's a professor here, yeah, it's possible. But but it's interesting because I was thinking, who could that have been? Kurt, he's constantly networking with people, so it's fascinating. That's how he has his startups, and that's how he got to Cal because he was working at Synopsys, and Richard Newton happened to be at Synopsys, and he was also the dean here at the UC Berkeley.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting that he said that, and I think we should go back and ask him about it. But I just want to put a plug in. If you all have an opportunity to have any kind of extra thing that you can do when you're applying besides a resume, like write a cover letter, write a quick email of thank you, just distinguish yourself. Sorry, that's my only plug.
You will stand out, I promise you. If you make that little extra effort, we do remember. People who hire, we do pay attention to those types of things, and they matter really now more than ever.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Claire.
Hi, hello, my name is Rakhi.
Hi.
I'm an admirer of TED and the work that Audacious do. So I was really curious how your work was with TED, and did it have any overlap with the Audacious? And as a CRO, what your typical day probably looked like?
Sure. TED was, one of these experiences where, just from a career advice perspective, there are two easy ways to think about moving from job to job. You either stay in the industry, or you can stay in the same function. So if you are in finance, you could do finance in fashion, you can do finance in supply chain management, you can do finance in pharmaceuticals. So when I started at TED, it was more about being in media, but I had actually never been a chief revenue officer. I had P&L responsibility, two wildly different things. But it was really weird to be there running revenue at a nonprofit. Many people were like, what does that mean? The basic gist is you still have to make more than you spend. This is how you make companies continue to function. And so it was a taxing and difficult job because I had to find revenue in places that were aligned with our mission. And if you're too draconian with that filter to say the company has to always do good, we would have been out of business. Companies are mercenary. It's a competitive place. I told you this is a form of capitalism that's like no other. But what I will say is that while I was there, I'd come at it after 20 some odd years of working, and I was really happy that I actually had some of that maturity and that many years of experience under my belt, because every single week it was a knife's edge. Is this okay? Is this kosher? Should I do a deal with the NFL? Should I not do a deal with the NFL? Should I do one with, a pharmaceutical company? So I was basically constantly being challenged by thinking about how it was that I was trying to embrace the mission, preserve the integrity of the mission, while also making sure that we were financially viable. So it was actually just like a really interesting kind of psychological experiment for me. But I loved it. And the reason that I think I did well there was because it was really selling people on the dream. And if you believe in something, people can feel it. So just to kind of get back to the same notion about this humanity, you can't be ignorant. You have to really understand the fundamentals of something. But if you like it and you really feel deeply for it, other people can sense that, and that becomes infectious. And that's really where I found some success while I was there. But it was interesting and challenging all at the same time.
Who has the mic?
Here.
Oh.
All right.
My name is Zephyr. Thank you
Hi.
for amazing sharing. Like you mentioned, no matter in the career pivot or like the cases like Toyota, my question is, how can we make the accumulation mapping with the real solution? Like, is there any strategy we can think out of the box and find that, oh, this might be the solution? Like AI now, it's a good tool to do a lot of data, and also they can generate information. But knowledge is what humans do. Is there any strategy that we can make our accumulation into like real helpful knowledge?
You know, this is going to be a really boring answer, but the more experiences that you have, the more capable you are of being able to draw those connections. But if we expand it outside of your own professional experience, it also has to do with the different populations of people that you know. And it's when you have a problem that you find that you don't have a solution for internally, don't only look inside of your industry or when you're looking for a solution. So this is why the networking can be so important, to look at companies that are not based in the US. There are novel ideas. I remember I went to Asia. I brought the first interactive TV application to the United States because I'd been on a business trip in Hong Kong. And so it was an exposure to something else. And you can't poo-poo it. I'm known for saying yes. I say yes to almost anything. Anything I get invited to, I do it. I go on the trip to the Amazon. I go and travel the world, and I do those kinds of things. So I think the broader your expanse is of the people that you work with, and then also just making sure that you pay a lot of attention to the work that you're doing currently and bring it forward. You don't think it's relevant. I came to GLG mostly because I networked with a friend of mine who is now the CEO, and she'd asked me to come, and I thought, expert network, I don't really know much about it. It doesn't make sense for me. And then I realized, oh my God, this is an amalgam of everything I've ever done. I've worked in financial services. I've worked in professional services firms. I've worked with experts. I know events. I understand all of these different facets, and they all kind of came together. But frankly, that might actually be the case outside of GLG. So it's, while it's a beautiful thing to think that you can kind of stay in the same career at the same company for a really long time, I actually think it's okay to have lots of different experiences. Don't move jobs every year. This is not good. But, you can have a job for 3-4 years and just get a lot of these different experiences under your belt, because I actually think at some point it's kind of the breadth of experience that comes to bear, and then eventually you do probably need to specialize.
As a fellow MBA student here from Haas, I'm Kim.
Hi.
I wonder, just for your first job outside of business school, were there anything surprise you? Like, is there any mental adjustment we have to prepare ourselves to the real world, because we are basically in this beautiful school for 2 years, and for me is my last year, and thinking of facing the real world again is kind of intimidating, but also exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
Are there any adjustment you suggest us to prepare us?
Yeah, I mean, Harvard Business School has a really distinct style of teaching. A lot of business schools do use the case study method. We're 100% case study. So there are 500 of them that you go through over the course of 2 years. And someone used something really interesting. It was like video game simulations. That's kind of what you're doing, 3 times Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 times Tuesday, Thursday. So however many that is in any given week. But I think what was really great about it is in each one of those simulations, you're forced to try to solve a problem with explicitly kind of imperfect cases. Either too much information, not enough information, the wrong information, and they give you too many cases, and there are not enough hours in the day. But what comes from that is you become really efficient in understanding how to cull quickly, become decisive, and see the forest through the trees. And so when I left business school and I went to the knot.com, which is where I went to right after I graduated, I did notice that I was just one level up in being able to see a slightly larger context, a slightly wider view of the world. And I think that's probably the greatest gift that does keep on giving. So as you continue in your career, your ability to be able to distill information that's disparate and in really short spurts of time becomes better and better and better. And the baseline of that did, for me, at the very least, come from business school.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
My name is Evan Gold, and I'm looking for wisdom here. So it might take me a sec to get it out right, but I really liked what you were talking about with the Amazon there. But in the day-to-day, when we don't have the space to get to the Amazon, where are the places, or how do you find the space to make those really powerful lateral connections instead of just predicting the next token?
Actually, it kind of harkens back to one of the earlier questions. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but this whole do what you love thing, figure out how to find social circles of people that are interested in things that that you love, right? And it can be the arts, and it can be dancing, it can be whatever it is, because those people have jobs. So that's another way of being able to connect with people. But I understand it's a luxury for me able to get on a plane and go away for 2 weeks and have this amazing experience with this nonprofit. But I think the critical thing here is just be in as many organized activities or groups, leadership groups or clubs or what have you. They're organized, which means there's some discipline with regard to how often and how regularly is that you convene, because that's really where you start to build the muscle, where you get to know these people a little bit better, and then there's a little bit more of that give-get, so then there's networking. You start to see all these things actually combining with each other. But it's about travel and meeting people and doing things that you love and joining clubs and being part of a sports league. And for me, it all started with one of my former bosses who I literally just had lunch with 20 years later. I have now brought her into the network of GLG as an expert, but she introduced me. She literally put me up for this thing called the Betsy Magnus program. It was a 9-month program that celebrated kind of rising stars in the organization. It was geared towards women. That was my very first experience of what it felt like to be part of a leadership group with a group of strangers, and I fell in love. And I know it can be awkward for some people, but in many levels, it's easier if it's organized. It's not wandering around a party trying to find somebody. If you can find something that is organized, that gives you a schedule and a group of people that you have access to on some regular cadence, this is where you start to form those relationships. And in those relationships, the more time you spend, the deeper it is your conversations are, where you get to learn what they learned from. You get to get insights that you would not have seen just by looking at a LinkedIn profile. So I can't tell you how important it is to make sure that you live your life outside of the classroom and outside of your workspace. That's why I talk about the connective tissue between the jobs and the decisioning that I had to do in between that ended up being more important than the job itself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name's Manlin. I really like the slide you had on human-specific soft skills, and you mentioned two terms I've never heard before: coalition building before meetings, and also soft power. Could you expand on what those mean?
Sure. Yeah, I talk about this all the time with people that work for me. Never go into a meeting cold. Don't go into. If you're introducing a new concept. If you're introducing a new concept, or it's big, or it's complicated, or you're presenting, all the work that you've done over the last 6 months researching something, know who's going to be in the room and use your communication skills to just water cooler, to take them to lunch, to have an informal meeting, to just seed the concepts with them, start getting feedback and adjust what it is that you're going to share. But this is where you do the coalition building. You get them to nod. They start to care and actually feel like, oh, you know what, she's done the work. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to lean in when she shares this at whatever the monthly meeting is going to be. So this is something that you should do in any environment. It doesn't matter what industry that you work in. It doesn't matter what your functional area of expertise is. If you are going to present something new, if you're trying to disrupt something, if you're just sharing information, that does require a little bit of explanation, it's really important to do that coalition building on the side, preparing people, softening people up so that the time that you get into that room, there are no curveballs, there are no things that are going to be unanticipated. You aren't going to have naysayers that you have not thought through what a response might be. It's really important. So the work, it's almost like what I care about is not just the core, it's what surrounds it that is really important. And so that and soft power are kind of, soft power is a little bit different. Soft power is, rather than saying, I'm your boss, do what I say or else, that's a little parenting, like it's because mom said so. That does not get people to follow you. They don't feel loyal as a result of it. It doesn't give warm and fuzzies. Soft power is simply showing them the ways that you do things, suggesting, working through their colleagues, other team members to be able to kind of just share feedback, and just basically trying to lead by telling stories about past experiences that you know are directly related to what it is that you're trying to share without being punitive, without being prescriptive, without being authoritative. Depends on your personal style. So again, you have to look at yourself and say, how is it that you communicate best? But I do think that as you get more senior, you do engender more respect if you use more soft power skills than by being kind of a dictator.
Hi, I'm Dawson. I liked what you said at the end about adaptability, and it made me think a lot about like the skill sets that I have. And I know you talked about like soft skills, human skills, and AI. I'm wondering more specifically, is it about being like well-rounded or reflecting on yourself in like areas that you have weak spots, or in general, like what skills or jobs or projects should we be pursuing to become more adaptable? Could you expand more on building that skill?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am constantly adapting in my new role. So one of the things that I realized when I started at GLG, I was like, oh God, this is really interesting, and I'm able to bring to bear all of my other experiences. The other gift that I got from working here, I am in a master class of AI. So not only are we using AI like every other company to find efficiencies across the organization, we're also using them to enable our clients to work directly with our experts. It's for our experts to be able to use AI tools in their own journey and being able to expand on their profile so they get matched or they can be found better or more fast through search. So we use it on every angle, and so it's been just, like I said, you're just jumping into the deep end with AI. The way that you become adaptable is by doing things that are kind of uncomfortable. I'm trying to use different workflow products, different note-taking applications. I'm learning all of these new things, and we're all learning it together, but it's a little uncomfortable. Would I rather bring out my notepad and use my wonky, Evernote to-do kludgy solution, or should I try to use Asana? And I'm forcing myself into getting into a routine of repeating and doing things over and over again that are new and uncomfortable for me. And I think that's the fastest path to learning how to be adaptable. So when you know there's an alternative way, it's almost like you've heard people saying like, you should spend some time writing with your left hand, or brain games to make sure that your mind is sharp by doing things that challenge the way that you normally do them, because grooves start to form in your brain that are really, really hard to change those pathways over time. And so the more actively you pursue things that are uncomfortable, learning something new, being a little bit embarrassed and a little bit uncomfortable, and what's even more important is you can find other people to do that with, so it can become actually something social and a little bit less intimidating. But try things that are a little bit uncomfortable regularly.
I just want to leave some time for people to also come up and talk to you afterwards. I think it's fantastic to stop on that note, because you probably are doing something that is the most uncomfortable thing, besides maybe fear of heights, being high, and that is talking in front of people. And so we've had incredibly accomplished individuals. I think you're our fifth speaker, and everybody has a different way of attacking the stage or addressing the audience. And I hope that you all appreciate that and see certain things about yourself in Lisa, and you always bring something new to the Newton series. So thank you very, very much. A huge round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.